Today on CityCast Philly. In 2011, the Philadelphia Water Department created the Green City Clean Waters program to fix the city's aging sewer systems. Even though the program was nationally recognized for its innovation, it's turning out to be more costly than expected. And we're talking in the billions of dollars. I'm speaking with an independent environmental journalist to figure out if the city needs a better plan to handle its sewage problems. It's Thursday, June 13th. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Kyle Bagenstose, freelance journalist. Welcome back to CityCast Philly.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back.
Yes. Okay, so Kyle, you recently wrote an article for Grid Philly about the Green City Clean Waters program that's been going on for more than a decade. But first, let's go back to 2012 when the plan was first implemented. And listeners, brace yourselves if you're eating, but the idea was to find a way to deal with the billions of gallons of raw sewage that would overflow into rivers and creeks every year. Kyle, that is so nasty. So just tell me, how was this program in Philly maybe different than how other cities were approaching sewer problems?
Yeah. So I think it's helpful to back up for a second and just define what Philly's sewers look like. So the average person probably has a picture of their sewer line that runs down the street, collects the sewage, right? And then there's a separate line that captures all the stormwater, that goes down the stormwater drains. Well, here in Philly, like a lot of old cities, we have an old infrastructure where both these things are actually combined in one single pipe. So the sewer line in your street also collects stormwater. And that's bad because when it rains a lot, it can cause those lines to overflow. They can either overflow into the river, as you said, dumping billions of gallons of raw sewage or mixed sewage a year into the waterways, or sometimes it can even back up into people's homes and basements, which is obviously not an ideal situation. So historically, most cities have dealt with this around the country by using quote unquote gray infrastructure. So that's installing, big underground tunnels. We're talking about 20-foot wide tunnels that can stretch for miles to basically contain all this overflow until it can be treated. Philly took a different approach, hailed as widely innovative. And what that does is uses green infrastructure. So I think the simplest thing is just think of a rain garden, right? Most people can picture rain gardens in their head, but scaled up sometimes to like a really big size, off the highway, off 95, maybe you can see these really big kind of rain gardens. Things like green roofs, plants on the roof. And the idea is those things are going to capture the rainwater and never let it get into the sewers in the first place to overflow them. So it's a pretty different approach. And Philly was the first city and remains the only city to do really the majority of its work on green infrastructure to handle this problem.
Okay, so now we're 12 years in, and Kyle, you report that installing these rain gardens or even tree-lined sidewalks was pitched to be a less expensive alternative than drilling underground tunnels. Is that right?
Yeah, when pitched, it definitely was pitched as a cheaper option. So the original cost estimate was about $2.4 billion to do this over 25 years. I never saw a very firm number for what the gray infrastructure, the tunnels, could cost. There was one kind of thrown out there of about maybe up to $10 billion. And also pitched was that this was going to have co-benefits, right? A tunnel is just in the ground. It doesn't do much besides collect water, where green infrastructure can beautify neighborhoods, can alleviate heat in the summertime. So it really did seem like a great innovative idea.
Kyle, if I walk or drive or even bike around Philly, where would I notice these examples of this type of green infrastructure?
My guess is you and any other Philadelphian pass by them every day, don't even maybe realize it. So oftentimes there are these kind of just little almost like pocket installations where you'll just be like, I live up in Mount Airy. When I walk to the train station, I walk by maybe about 20 feet long of a little rain garden, right? And it just looks like vegetation. You might not even know that it was installed as part of this program. Sometimes there's signage, sometimes there isn't. I didn't really look at this for my story, but there's also a homeowner side where if you see the blue rain barrels attached to people's downspouts across the city, that's something that's offered for free to homeowners through this program. And there's also things like some downspout planters and permeable pavers. And also the Philadelphia Water Department maintains a map on its website showing where all this green infrastructure is. I think there are over 800 installations at this point, and they're really peppered throughout the city. So, as I said, I'm sure you walk by one or multiple every day.
Interesting. More on this story after the break. Kyle, you just explained to me about how the Green City Clean Waters program was supposed to cost less than drilling underground tunnels to store excess sewage. Has that proven to be the case?
So the program is halfway through its lifespan right now. So the whole point of this story was basically to check in at the halfway mark and say, how are things going, right? And anybody who reads the story is going to understand that there's signs of potential trouble here. So I think the really top line number is that, and the Philadelphia Water Department has confirmed this, that the program is now estimated to cost $4.5 billion over its lifespan, not 2.4. So right there, that's $2.1 billion of extra money. And that original estimate too of 2.4 was already accounting for things like, anticipated inflation and things like that. So we're $2 billion over the mark. And I think what's really interesting as well is that there's internal PWD studies, more or less, that have looked at the cost of this traditional tunnel infrastructure fresh. And the prices are actually come down from what was originally estimated back in like 2009, 2010. So I think there's, really considerable questions about whether or not the cost effectiveness of this program is still what it was pitched to be, whether it's still the right approach. All of these plans have some kind of mix of gray and green. I think the real question is the current really green heavy focus, about 70% of the spending on green infrastructure, is that really still the right goal to have in light of what we've seen over the implementation over the first decade here?
I see. And, from your reporting, you say that there's been some conflicting opinions about these increased costs. What have people told you?
Yeah. So, I try and as much as possible, because this definitely is a contentious issue. I think even from the start of this program, you had people who believed in it and those who didn't, and maybe their opinions don't change over time. So, the fact that this program is $2.1 billion over, I think is really telling. There is some debate over how much of that is kind of expected or reasonable. Some of the sources that spoke with me on background from Philadelphia Water Department, said basically they think it's bad money being thrown at this year. That the implementation has not gone well, that prices have increased compared to what they thought, that the original estimates of tunnels were way too high. And so basically the facts on the ground say that an adjustment should be made. Philadelphia Water Department, I think if I can just generalize, I haven't seen anything that suggests that they have that point of view, at least the leadership or whoever's responding to my questions when I submit them. They say a lot of this kind of came off of COVID, the craziness that did to our economics, that they're constantly learning and adapting, and basically that the program more or less remains on track.
I mean, what are we supposed to kind of make of this conflicting narrative?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm actively exploring with the reporting. I think I'm just trying to present the facts as I know them. I mean, so much of this plan, Green City Clean Waters, has gotten really positive press in the past. I mean, almost overwhelmingly so. And I'm not saying none of that was warranted. There are a lot of, as I said, co-benefits of green infrastructure. There's a lot of merit, I think, behind the idea. I think the value of this reporting is for the first time really exposing that's not the only opinion out there, right? That there's other people who, and it appears certainly at least have some of the facts that I've reported on their side. I think it raises serious questions. And so, for me as a reporter, I'm just trying to bring these things to light, and hopefully the people, with the most closely held knowledge and power will take a look, and decide whether or not this program's on track or if it does need to change course.
I want to get back to that money part, right? Because that's really important too. Kyle, who's paying for these costs?
Assuming you live in the city like I do, Trenae, we are for the most part. So this program is funded. If you're a homeowner in Philadelphia, or I guess some renters as well, you receive your monthly Philadelphia Water Department bill. If you pay attention to the line items on there, there's a stormwater fee. And that essentially was implemented to help pay for this program. I'm not privy to all the finances. I don't know exactly how PWD, Philadelphia Water Department, comes up with all of the billions to pay for this. But I do know that a lot of it falls down to the ratepayer. I think Philadelphia Water Department, like any government agency or utility, is always looking for all of the funding it can get from other sources, mainly federal, state, maybe some philanthropic. But everything that I've seen does not suggest that that's the majority here. We're paying for it as Philadelphians on our water bill.
Got it. Bigger picture here, Kyle. Is the Green City Clean Waters program a success so far, or is it just too soon to tell?
Yeah, once again, we're at the halfway mark for this. It wraps up in 2036. I think you could make predictions. You can try and look at some of the facts on the ground and determine it. Ultimately, this is an innovative program. This is the first time somebody's kind of doing something like this. But I think, as the reporting shows, there is serious questions about whether or not it is working as envisioned at its halfway point. Mm-hmm. I think one of the complicating factors to this, too, is just what the program is trying to achieve, right? So this program is primarily required by a federal regulation through the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's all about water quality. That's what the EPA wants to see, right? They want to see sewage stops going into the water, which harms ecosystems, which harms fish, wildlife, and also makes it unsafe for people to do things like boat and fish on the river when that happens. But Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia has a lot of problems on its hand. I'm actually working on another story right now about heat adaptation, right? How our city's getting hotter with climate change. And one of the number one tools that you can use is to green your city, right? To plant trees, to turn cement into natural spaces, which helps deal with, heat and helps reduce the heat island effect. Studies have also shown, I think there was a study out of Baltimore, that green beautification can help reduce crime. I think that's pretty well documented in the literature at this point. So I had a source make the point to me, if you're the mayor of Philadelphia, and I just mean this very generally, you're looking and you've got to spend billions of dollars to fix your sewage plant, it sure looks appetizing, right? To do something where you also can use that funding to deal with things like crime, to deal with things like heat, right? And so I think, and there's a lot of merit to that. Once again, it comes back to what are we trying to achieve? And with the EPA's regulation, if this program effectively does some of those things, which I think it does, but in 2036, it hasn't achieved what the EPA actually really cares about here, which is water quality, then the city might just have to start all over, right? It could be a lot of sunk costs, or have to do at least a lot of additional work on top of it. So that is definitely a complicating factor to this.
All right, that was Kyle Bagenstose, freelance journalist. Thanks for breaking this story down and for joining me on CityCast Philly.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
You can read Kyle's full story by clicking the link in our show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know what you think of this episode. Rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the Friday News Roundup. Bye.